sent there, and I know the job that was put in front of me. I used to deal with students in a rather direct manner, and they used to tell me, my father has a lawyer, or if you do that to me, I'll call the Bedford Sackville Daily News. And it was a contest in Sackville at the time, right? Who was going to be on the front page of the BS, excuse the terminology, but we used to call it the BS News. Who was going to be on the front page of the Bedford Sackville Daily News more this week? The vice principal at the high school, or the cat that was caught on the roof, or the dog that had been running away and run over by a fire truck, whatever. And I want to tell you, that lack of consistency, I have friends who are in the business of running schools. And Mr. Minister, they don't feel they're in charge. They're being second-guessed all the time. And of course, you have that feeling everybody's an expert in the school system because they happen just to have gone to school. And I can tell you, as you well know, that doesn't make you an expert in running schools. So those expectations are out there of dealing with young men and women with what they're wearing. Oh, that's a very small element. When you're looking at all the other things that are happening to these young men and women today, at whatever grade they're in junior high school or high school, but it all comes down to a matter of respect. And I'll tell you, it's a community effort. You know, it's a community effort. Who's raising the children? Is it the school teacher, or is it the entire community? That African proverb of the village and the child and the who's responsible. But I'd like to talk about a couple of items now, if I could, Mr. Chair. Items of specific interest to me whenever I see P3 schools. So I would like to direct you and your staff to the attention to the Supplement to Public Accounts, March 31st, 2003, and I compare it to the previous year, which I have also here. And I'm going to turn to page 48, right? 48? Page 48. And I see this trust funds, P3 schools. Now in March 2002, the previous year, that you don't have there in front of you, I can make that available to you. The figure was $845,513.49. This year, or the previous year for supplement to public accounts, March 2003, the amount is $708,982. Now, the alarm bells always go off because I have said it, and I know the members of the third party get upset with this comment. My children are going to be paying, my grandchildren could be paying, if they live in the community that I currently live in, for this P3 fiasco. But could you explain to me what this trust fund stuff is all about?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
That particular line item, Mr. Chair, under the P3 lease agreements, a portion of the lease payment was put into a trust fund for technology refreshment. So that money should be available. It's paid into a trust fund, and it is available to refresh technology in the P3 schools.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Timberley Prospect.
I want the member to know you never ask a question with no knowing the answer. But here, the follow-up is, the amount has gone down. The amount has gone down, and I point out to you that, and I don't have that, I have the number here, and if you would, I could provide you with a copy of the previous year's supplement to public accounts, which I have from year to year keep. This is the previous year. And the March 2002 amount was $845,000. Now it's $708,982 or 83. Who keeps track of those numbers? I mean, where are we with the fact that these dollars are being spent? Where are they being spent? To what schools and for what reasons?
Thank you. That question, member. The The Honorable Minister of Education.
They have to apply for that. Who makes the decision?
Between the developer and the agreement as to
Mr. Chair, that money is basically paid on a square foot basis. It goes into a central fund, and then the money flows back to the schools. The decision is made between the developer, who would be the P3 group, and the and who is it? The teachers? Department. And the Department of Education, if the applications for that money are ones that would be supported in a particular year.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The specifics are what I'm after, because if I look at where the elementary children in my own community go to school, they go to a P3 school, St. Margaret's Bay Elementary. I'm not sure of the square footage of the school. There are other children who go to a P3 school up in the Hammonds Plains Road. And of course, there's Ridgecliff Middle School, which is the junior high school for the growing communities of Beachville, Lakeside, and Timberley. Now, I've been in all those schools, and I guess what I would like to have is assurance to the fact that, and when I look at the amount of money involved, who's involved in deciding, requesting, asking for? And I hope that the answer is that teachers are being consulted, because, you know, here we go again on this particular topic. Here we go again on this particular topic when it comes to P3 schools. They build them, they have developments surrounding them, and surely there are benefits for the developer that had the opportunity to build the schools, but we do not have the opportunity on the ongoing operation of the school as a community to have our say. So could you clarify for me the process of who decides at these P3 schools what amount of money is being used? I understand that's per square foot, but for what reasons?
Thank you, member. The Honorable Minister of Education.
Each school, when it was built, had a technology plan, and the money was, let's say, paid into the fund by the as part of the lease payments. So each year, the school would identify their technology needs, the needs for technology refreshment, and would submit their request to the developer. And the developer, in turn, would submit that plan to the Department of Education. Once it's approved, then the money would flow to the schools.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a number of other questions, and I know it'll eventually come back to me at my opportunity as follows, but I would like to share my time at this stage with the member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, member. I'm going to recognize the member for Cumberland South, who is occupying the seat of the member for Guysborough-Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the honourable member for Timberley Prospect for agreeing to share his time with me today on this very important topic. I'd also like to thank the minister and the staff for being here today. We're setting a little bit of history here today, I think, with me taking the place of the honourable member for Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, but I do appreciate the member's indulgence. I'd like to ask the honourable minister of Education, if he could for me, if you could explain to me for the Shenectady Central Regional School Board's budget last year over this year, the increase, if there has been one, and exactly what those increases he would think would be used for within the board's budgetary process.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'd ask the honourable member from Cumberland South to indulge me for a minute The change between last year and this year in budget for the Chignecto Central District School Board was a little bit, pretty close to $3.8 million, which was an increase of about 2.7%. And a portion of that money was to be used, obviously, for teachers' salaries, and then in addition, there was money put in under the Learning for Life initiatives and operational increases too.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Dartmouth, or for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister. Could the Minister explain if it was his understanding or the Department's understanding whether, in fact, that the request from the Chignecto Central Regional School Board was made that it was determined they need additional funds, or else there could be a possible layoff within the board's jurisdiction?
Thank you, member. The Minister of Education.
Well, I don't think in that regard, Mr. Chair, that Chignecto Central was any different than any other board in the province. The population is decreasing in the Chignecto Central Board, and of course, some of the funding flows on a student ratio, and because the numbers of students went down, then it is expected that the number of teachers would be reduced.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Minister would recall a meeting that MLAs for the Chignecto Central Regional School Board area had with the school board, and I think it'd be fair to say at that meeting that it was quite unclear between members. In fact, one member expressed, in fact, the chairman expressed right off the bat that they would require an additional $500,000. Within 2 minutes of that statement being made, someone else on the board suggested they would need an additional $1 million to be able to maintain their present formula staffing of teachers. Could the Minister explain, within the province of Nova Scotia, if there's a minimum standard requirement of programming, either for educational needs in general, or at least in a P-12 school, where there have to be a minimum standard of program have to be available for a community to sustain a P-12 school?
Thank you, member, for the question. The honourable member, Minister of Education.
Well, the public school program does prescribe graduation requirements, and it also prescribes subjects for elementary school, the mandatory subjects, as well as, well, the mandatory subjects, and most schools do offer optional subjects. So yes, there is a prescribed program, and I guess really the bottom line is you have to meet the graduation requirements.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing I'd like for the minister to explain to me, if he could, and that is when a board allocates specific staff for a school, and when they hold certain positions in abeyance, if you could explain for the House what abeyance positions are and how it's determined possibly that certain schools may get abeyance positions where other ones may not.
Thank you, member. Recognize the Minister of Education.
Based on need.
Mr. Chair, what happens for most school boards in the province is that they staff on a formula, and they hold a number of positions in reserve for special situation. For example, maybe an increased enrollment, a rapid decrease, or a rural school or something like that. So what you probably find is that people would be, or administrators early in a year would be given, you've got X numbers of students, under the formula, this would be the number of teachers that you would be entitled to, but then the board does hold back a number of positions to allow for some fairness and consistency across the district. There, not every situation is the same, and of course, when you fund on a straight per pupil formula, then it doesn't work.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the minister is well aware of the school in Advocate, which is a P-12 school. This school is well known across this province for its academic standards, what the teachers and the staff there in the community have been able to provide to the community over the last number of years. And in fact, for a small school, they're well known across Nova Scotia for their their successes in athletics. Thank you, Minister. That's right, exactly. But I can tell you a bombshell was dropped on the School of Advocate on Monday. Last year, that school was notified that they would lose a teaching position. Now, they only have 2 positions, they only have 7 positions left at that school in Advocate. Monday, they were told they're going to lose another position. Some of those grades at this point are triple graded. Primary 1 and 2 are together, 3, 4, and 5 are together. I provided a copy of the schedule to the minister so you can see what those teachers are facing today. I think the minister would agree that to take another position from that school, I believe, is in the mind of the community, is leading to the death of that community school. And I think that myself as the MLA for the area, I've told the community this, I've told the teachers this, I've told the board member there and the county councilor that I wouldn't stand by and allow the board to close that school. In fact, I won't stand by and allow them to decrease the staff any further. I think it brings into jeopardy that the opportunities for the students in that area to receive the proper education that they deserve and they need. I think that I think a previous administration recognized that Advocate is an isolated school and gave it specific designation at that time. And I'm wondering if the ministers had an opportunity to review the information I gave him, and if he's had an opportunity to consider what impact it would have on that school. And in fact, that school board is allowed to take another teaching position from that community.
Thank you, member, for the question. The Honourable Minister of Education.
As the honourable member knows, I'm right behind him, maybe as familiar with the School at Advocate as anybody else in the House, and indeed with the beautiful community of Advocate. And for those of you who have not been down to visit Advocate Harbour or seen Cape Dore, I would recommend it as a trip this summer. And it's not only beautiful down there, it's a great drive down, but do it in the sunshine. As the honourable member, I think the last time I was in there, he and I were there announcing a nurse practitioner program for the community health center in Advocate, and I know that that's been a great success. So certainly Advocate is a community. The issue of the Advocate School, it's a rural school. Clearly, it would not be our intention to let that school go, I can tell you that. There are a couple of reasons, I guess, for that. I guess the primary one is that you and I both know where Advocate is, and in the winter what sometimes it's like to get in and out Advocate. And not only that, if you were to close that school and move up to Parsborough or even go back the other way up to River Hibbert or someplace, the travel times, well, they just wouldn't work. So the future of a school in Advocate is certainly, I think, assured. It's a small rural school. Now, on the other hand, talking about the number of teachers are there, as I understand, I have staff looking at the documentation that you did give me the other day on the potential teaching schedules if a teacher is removed from that school. And but quite frank, they did raise some questions. The projected enrollment for that school is 61 students over 13 grades. And that is not an easy situation either for the school board to deal with. I do know that the Advocate School has been a good school, and indeed we know it was rated at the top of the province there 2 or 3 years ago, I think, in the Ames group. And I also know particularly, I think their girls basketball program was used to win the provincial championships regularly, and even I think Mr. Taylor was on one of the other teams he played against. So. But it's a good school. It's a challenge. I can say that in regard to the situation that the honourable member has brought to my attention, to the attention of my staff, I had the regional education officer review that. I have some data on it. I can tell you that the recommendation that did come is, at this point, not final. The board is going to review the situation. It will go to the Education Committee and then back to the board for decision. So I understand as well, I'm told that there is a public meeting tonight in support of that school down in Advocate, and I'm sure that the residents in that community will make as they usually do, a very articulate and forceful presentation to the people that represent them on the school board.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Minister. You're absolutely right. My closing comments, I just want to mention that you're right, Advocate is about an hour away from the nearest community of Parsboro. That's on a good day like today, on terrible roads and terrible weather. You know, it could mean that some students would have to face 2 hours on the school bus. In fact, that was the school board's intention, and I'm really pleased to hear what the minister has said here today. But I'm really concerned that if the board is allowed to decrease the teachers at that facility any further, that the stress, both on the system and on the programming and on the teachers themselves, will be probably too much to bear. And in fact, I've had some discussion with some of the staff the last couple of days, and in the fact that that's allowed to happen, I think we'll probably see some teachers that want to leave that community. And I think it'd be disastrous to the community of Advocate. Again, one last question to the minister, if I could. I'd ask the minister if he would have his department do a review of the Advocate School to ensure that the board is providing the proper number of teaching staff to provide the level of education programming that's afforded to the other students throughout this province. And as well, I'd ask the minister again to make a commitment here today to the House that the Department of Education will not allow Schenectady Central Regional School Board to either decrease the level of staff and educational opportunities at that school, or in fact, allow that school to close.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
As the honourable member knows, as I said earlier, we've had the department staff is now looking at some of the data which was presented. The actual, and we would be very concerned that the school was not adequately staffed and able to deliver the program. However, the Department of Education does not make the ultimate staffing decision. That would be a decision of the board. However, we will be looking into the situation, and from a department perspective, we are concerned about Advocate.
Thank you very much, Minister. The Honourable Member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister. I think the Minister would agree that Advocate is an isolated school. I think it's an isolated situation, in fact, when we look at schools around the province. And I believe that it's in the power of the Minister and the Department to actually designate that school as an isolated school and ensure that the proper level of staffing is available through that for that facility, even though I know the board is ultimately responsible for the allocation of staff, and they will be throughout the district. But I would like to ask the minister to have his department look at Advocate in an isolated situation, because it is an isolated community. And I would ask the minister to have his staff at least look at that and consider whether or not the Department of Education and the minister can consider Advocate as a special situation and look at the complement of staff that would properly provide the program that the students so much need and deserve there.
Thank you, Member. The Minister of Education.
As the honourable member knows, the department is committed to next year to developing a province-wide isolated school strategy, and clearly Advocate, in my mind, would be one of those schools that would be included.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Cumberland South. Thank you. We will recognize the Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, it's certainly not a pleasure for me to be standing here today, but I believe I have to do this because of the people in my constituency and the people in Pictou County, the people in Colchester County, and the people in Cumberland County. Today in Truro, while listening to the radio station, I heard that there are going to be 24 teaching positions eliminated from the Schenectady Central Regional School Board. Now, off these, the only good news was that these were not going to be permanent positions. Now, the reason quoted for the elimination of the teachers, the reason quoted was simple. It was lack of funding by the Department of Education to the Schenectady Central Regional School Board. And very seldom do you hear the word that there's a declining enrollment in these schools. Now, I just want to get our facts straight, Mr. Minister. I know that, I believe that last year that there was a $500,000 infusion to the Schenectady Central Regional School Board. Is that correct?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, I didn't hear the Truro radio this morning, but last year the member is absolutely right. There was a special grant, I guess you'd call it special grant or supplemental grant, as a transitional thing to the Schenectady Central School Board of $500,000 to help them adjust to some of the declining student population. I think the honourable member points out a good thing, and they say they are cutting, I believe he used the word 24 or 23 teachers, and probably it is more accurate to say that they are announcing that they intend to eliminate that many teaching positions, which is an entirely different thing because the population is going down. I think it's gone down about, how much? Well, somewhere around 500 in between the population count the last 2 years. And if you were to, okay, just I can. In that, if you would divide that by pupil teacher ratio of 25, and you would probably come out pretty close to what they're doing simply on the basis of a formula. But the number of retiring teachers, if we take right across the province next year, the number of retiring teachers is over 500. The number of teaching positions that, because of enrollment decline, would be taken out of the system would be 93. So it still means that there would be 400 plus new teachers hired.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
And that 400, 500 new teachers to be hired, I am certainly not at this point going to get into certification of teachers, knowing what I already went through. Mr. Chair, I have to say that I'm concerned about what the school board is saying, but I'm also more concerned about what they're not saying. So what I've been hearing and the figures and the research that I've done, and I brought this up last year and I'm at a meeting, in-camera meeting, but I'm going to bring it up again because I don't believe there's a need for a teaching position to be lost in Advocate or practically anywhere else. And there's more monies for school supplies, more money for books, and so on. And I want to show you where I'm going with this. And is there an agreement between the Schenectady Central Regional School Board, and I'm going to zero in on two Mi'kmaq Indian bands, namely the Millbrook and the Indian Brook.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Yes, both the Millbrook First Nation and the Indian Brook First Nation have tuition agreements with the Schenectady Central Regional School Board, and also the third, the Pictou Landing Band does as well.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
I thank you for that. And I'm not going to zero in on the Pictou Landing because that's in another riding, although I know Indian Brook is, but and so is Millbrook. However, they are close, and I'm aware of their situation. And I must say at this time that I commend Chief Lawrence Paul for his band and the way he is running his reserve. And also, I understand that he gave $100,000 to the new Truro Junior High enhancement program. Is that correct?
Thank you, Member. Minister of Education.
Actually, Mr. Chair, the Millbrook First Nation, their contribution in enhancements to the new junior high where their students go was $195,000.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's certainly more than the 100,000 that I thought it was. And I congratulate Chief Lawrence Paul for that. And that brings me to the question of Indian Brook. Now, last year, I knew there were a considerable sum of money in the arrears through this agreement. Could the minister please tell me how much money is owed to the Schenectady Central Regional School Board by the Indian Brook Band?
Thank you, Member, for that question. The Honourable Minister of Education.
The estimated amount, Mr. Chair, at the end of March and in this year, March 31, 2004, was $1.8 million.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Minister. And I just want to know if I heard you correct. Was that $1.8 million that's owed?
Minister, could you verify that figure, please?
Yeah, the figure which I was given, Mr. Chair, was at the end of March this year, was at the end of the last fiscal year, I guess, was $1.8 million. Now, whether there have been adjustments to that amount in the ensuing month, I don't know, but that's what it was in March.
Thank you, Minister, for that clarification. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Minister, we know that the federal government gives money to the bands all across Canada for their education. Now, what these bands are actually doing is outsourcing their pupils to our schools at the expense, I shouldn't say these bands, I'll retract that. This band is doing is outsourcing their pupils to our public schools and collecting the money. Now, where is that money going that the band is collecting from the federal government for education? Do you know?
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, the agreements are between the school boards and the individual First Nations community, and you know, my experience with that when I was back in the system, and at that time the only one we dealt with two was with both Millbrook and Indian Brook, and I can't really give an accurate answer to the honourable member's question. I was on sort of the other side of the equation.
Okay, thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Well, with that statement, it appears to me that we know why the Schenectady Regional School Board is having a hard time managing its finances with monies like that owing. And I'm not aware if there's another band that's owing money or not. But I was aware of this last year, and I certainly brought it up to the members of that board last year. Is there any way that you know that there's a process in place to collect this money, whether it be through Schenectady, through to the Ministry of Education, assuming that those monies, or whatever? Could you please elaborate on that, please?
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
The money flows directly from the federal government, Department of Indian and Northern Affairs, to the individual bands. The Department of Education has offered, in working with the federal government and also with the bands and the school boards, if the federal government would be prepared to put the board's name on the check as well as the band's name or the department, then we would be pleased to have to act as a conduit for that. But that really the issue of how money is distributed to First Nations community from the Department of Northern Community Affairs or of Indian and Northern Affairs is something outside the provincial jurisdiction.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And particularly, as an MLA with a constituency in the Schenectady Central Regional School Board boundaries, I'm not really concerned who collects it, as long as it gets collected. Now, I do not think that the taxpayers of Cumberland, Colchester, and Pictou counties should be burdened with paying this debt. Also, I find it hard to believe that a teacher would be cut in Advocate, where we have been previously committed as an isolated school to keep those positions there, or any other position in our area. So what I'm going to ask the minister to do is not sit on this, but to act forthwith to come up with a solution to rectify this problem. Is the minister willing to do that?
Thank you, member. The Honorable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, certainly I'm quite prepared to ask our department officials to continue the conversation with the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs and as well as our own Department of Aboriginal Affairs to see if there is some way to prevent this type of situation from occurring in the future.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you. Now, I want to go into what happened previous to the staff of Schenectady Central Regional School Board. And I'm not going to dwell too heavy on this with this former superintendent, the former finance minister, and so on. But we know the problems, and that's been taken care of. They are no longer with the board. Now, last year, Truro had a by-election for a member of the Central Regional School Board. At that by-election, Mr. Minister, what percentage in Truro turned out for that election, for the school board position?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The arithmetic that I did on the situation came up with a number I was not very pleased with. There were two good candidates running for that seat in Truro, but the turnout for the by-election was 2%.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And with a 2% turnout, it would indicate to me that the people do not want that school board, which is now in place. In fact, I don't believe the majority of people want that school board at all, or a school board there. Which brings me to these questions. Mr. Minister, what monies do the people receive by being on the school board? Can you give me that?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
The member of a school board, the stipend currently is $7,200. That is under review, and there will be an announcement made before the next set of school board elections what it will be the next time if there is any change. I believe the vice chair gets $9,000 and the chairman gets $11,000.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
And on top of that, would they get traveling expenses and out-of-country trips and along those lines, or what?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
The way the school board members are remunerated is there is a basic salary that they get, and I'm going to have to check with staff to make sure that I...
No, they're right, except for the chair. Chair's 12.
I'm sorry, I told you the chair was 11, the chair is 12. I've been advised for staff. In addition to that, each board gets I think it's each board member gets $1,600 for professional development and meal allowances and things like that. No travel allowance in that?
It's not there, yeah.
And the travel allowance is in that as well. So they have basically $1,600, and if it could be used for professional development. And I assume that when they travel, as you know, in our constituency, people come from 3 counties and 4 municipalities, so there's a fair bit of traveling. And if, for example, if there was a board member traveling from Advocate, I'm not so sure that $1,600, if you met 2 or 3 times a month, would go very far if you were being paid mileage.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm not going to ask questions for a minute, but I want to go on record as stating that in our system, we have advisory boards set up to schools, which consist school advisory boards, which consist of teachers and parents who do their local schools. And through those people, we also have your family of schools, which look after another small segment of schools. And through that, we would have a reporting system to the superintendent of schools. And as my personal view would be, Mr. Minister, that the Chenectado Central Regional School Board be disbanded for not collecting on their monies owed, putting that on the backs of the teachers and the other pupils. And also, Mr. Minister, would you do a forensic audit of Chenectado Central Regional School Board?
Thank you, Member. And thank you. I'll recognize the Minister of Education.
As the honourable member knows, there was an external audit of that board as well as the Straight Board 3 years ago, which led to the pilot structure. I'm advised that you know, the books are audited each year, and I know that department staff, I do believe, do get monthly reports or quarterly reports from school boards. If you were to have a forensic audit, I guess I'm told you would need some reason to have a forensic audit. And the fact that, you know, that they are owed some money by, you know, through a contract, I guess I don't know enough about forensic audits, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North.
And I want to bring this out to the Minister. When the audit was completed last time, I must say that the Auditor General missed the meat of what was going on in the school board. In fact, he gave a glowing report of Chenectado Central Regional School Board, only to find out what was happening afterwards, which I'm sure that the MLAs knew, which was passed along but never acted on, but I'm not going to go there. And I'm talking about when they did the meat, nuts, and bolts, not the audit, but when it come out about using unused vacation credits towards their pensions, excessive expense accounts, whatever, which doesn't seem to bother anybody, and giving monies to certain school areas and not to others. For an example, approximately $2 million to Celtic schools in Pictou County and nothing hardly towards Cumberland County. These are things that come out in that audit, but prior to that, well, that didn't even come out in the audit, that came out after the audit. But prior to that, the audit that is conducted never showed anything but a glowing report for that school board. In fact, then, Superintendent McDonald sat in that gallery gloating at public accounts, because I was a member across there. The bottom line is, it's not fair, Mr. Minister, for the taxpayers, for the pupils to go without books, without school supplies, and that. Well, Indian Brook owes these taxpayers actually $1.8 million. And they should not have to shoulder that. That in itself shows the discrepancies, what's going on in the board, or is it our system?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, I missed the first part of his question. I wonder if you'd repeat it for me.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Colchester North, perhaps you could repeat the first part of the question as we continue with some of the toughest questioning the Minister has undertaken since May the 30th.
And I didn't know the
April
answer.
30th,
I used to do a stalling tactic like that, but anyway. I'll let you look at Hansard. So I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. In fact, what I'll say, Mr. Minister, is I've concluded my questions for today, and I thank you very much.
Order. Thank you, member. I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley, and you have about 5 minutes left.
Thank the Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect for giving me an opportunity just to place one question. Following along the same line of questioning that my colleague from Colchester North raised, I'm greatly troubled because last year we were told because of financial pressures, the elementary school, the Middle Stewiacke, closed. The elementary school, Brookfield Memorial School, closed. And in Colchester Musquodoboit Valley, and in fact Colchester County, we feel we did our part as far as working with the school and working with the Department of Education and the Chignecto Central Regional School Board, and in support of my colleague's request for a forensic audit. And I'm not so sure, Mr. Minister, if you've had much to do with the CCRA. However, being from a business background, I want to tell you that I have had some relationship and involvement with the forensic audit. And when there is questions about dollars and how dollars are expended, a forensic audit will take it line by line by line. Every little minute expenditure is brought out into the open, Mr. Speaker. And I just wanted to point out, Mr. Chairman, that I am supporting my colleague's call for a forensic audit, and the fact of the matter is that I believe that not all stakeholders are contributing equal to the Chignecto Central Regional School Board. And I would ask the Honourable Member and his staff, his colleagues to his right and left, to give the Honourable Member for Colchester North every consideration regarding his request for a forensic audit, because when schools are closing, whether it's in Colchester, Cumberland, or Pictou, under the Chignecto Central Regional School Board, and some of the stakeholders aren't stepping up to the plate and paying equally, then in fact I believe there is certainly reason for a forensic audit. And I'll do the Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect a favour and just leave it at that. And I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, member. Did you find a question in that, Minister? Perhaps you'd like to finish up. There's approximately 2 minutes left in the time.
Mr. Chair, the observations by the member from Colchester, beautiful Musquodoboit Valley, I've heard them. Again, I don't know much about forensic audits. I'm advised that that at least a few years ago there was clearly some management practices that were open to question that board, and they were drawn not only to the attention of the department but the attention of the public, and I'm told that they're fixed. If any honourable member would have some specific issue of, I guess forensic audit implies wrongdoing, I suppose. and I'm looking at my lawyer friend across the street, see if he's going to nod or say no or something like that. He doesn't know either.
Give him a dollar.
So, yeah, anyway, clearly, Mr. Speaker, if there are management practices, we are prepared to work with the board to see that they're straightened out.
Thank you, Minister, and return the remaining time back to the member for Timberley Prospect. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I really don't have a question. I have a request that members of the legislative staff who've been watching this, Mr. Terrio, Mr. Laffin, perhaps they could make some seat arrangements for tomorrow morning's session, and that we'd point out that we could fit a couple more desks on this side if it's acceptable. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Thank you. I'll recognize the honourable member for Annapolis at 4:50.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was first elected, I was given some advice that when you're in the floor of the legislature, you said, be careful because the enemy's all around you, and I didn't know what they meant until just now.
What do you say, Stan? You know what Samson said?
I want to thank the minister and the staff for giving me an opportunity to ask a few questions. I want to go back to an issue which he knows quite a bit about, and that is the Middleton Regional High School and the project that is being asked on the gymnasium. I'm sure he knows the situation that precipitated all this, and that was the music room that was being closed due to health and safety issues, and that project has been put forward, and I'm wondering where it stands within his department.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
And indeed, Mr. Chair, I used to be fairly familiar with that fine institution of long standing in that great community of Middleton, which also produced some very fine basketball teams, if I remember correctly. And indeed, I can say that I guess the member from Timberley Prospect is gone, but I think one of the finest high school coaches, high school athletic coaches ever to be graced in this province. Got to start down in Middleton. That was Bob Pierce from Truro. And anyway, he was just an outstanding person. What I can tell you, Mr. Chair, as I told the honourable member the other day, the particular capital project which he talks about, and I recognize that it's needed, is not on the capital priority list this time. We have suggested that he and the other community members who are raising this issue, they make their concerns known to the school board. We are in the process of setting up another capital construction major renovation committee, and we'd be quite pleased if the board presents that and wishes to make alterations to the list they've already submitted at that time. As a department, we'd be quite prepared to look at suggestions from the board. That list is not, as he knows, is not constructed by the department. It comes in from the boards.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the board makes that their priority, will your department act on it?
Thank you, member. The honourable Minister of Education.
Everything has its time, Mr. Chair, and in the proper time, certainly we'd be prepared to go ahead with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Annapolis.
The reason I'm asking that is in 1999, the Bridgetown Elementary School was the #1 priority of the Valley District School Board into having a gymnasium and a lunchroom built on the end of it. It was their #1 priority at that point, and as we've gone through over the last 5 years, every other one of their priorities has been dealt with. Some of them have been promised in 2008, 2009, except for that school. So I'm wondering what happens with that list when it reaches the department. It was a priority of the departments in '99, and yet it seems to be falling off the radar screen.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, what happens, Madam Chair, and welcome to the Chair, is that each board submits its own list. And the fact that something is or may be #1 on the priority list of the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board may not end up to be #1 on the list of the province. So all boards, they come in and submit their #1 and the #2 priorities, and sometimes priorities have to be changed because where they're unforeseen or things happen. But in general, once the lists come in, then the group in the department tries to determine where the need is the greatest.
The honourable member from Annapolis.
Sir, Chair, I'll go back to that again, though. The board is telling me that that priority was leapfrogged to other priorities in their district. When they gave you the list, that was not on the bottom of their list, but projects that were behind that are being promised 2008, 2009, and Bridgetown Elementary School has been left out of the equation. I'm just wondering, if the board is sending you a list, why are they sending you a list if that project is being leapfrogged to other projects below it?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I think I'm going to have to get some more detail on that. I can tell you that when these submissions come in, they are assessed, and I think what he was telling me is that Bridgetown was a #1 priority.
The honourable member from Annapolis.
99, Bridgetown Elementary School was the #1 priority of the government. We changed governments. It has not been dealt with since. Schools that were below them on the list were promised 2008, 2009, and Bridgetown still has not been dealt with 5 years later. That's the issue. Why all of a sudden has a priority of 99 been let go, even though it's still on the list of the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board? They'll tell you every one of the other priorities they put forward last year was dealt with. The one in my riding was not, and that was Bridgetown Elementary School.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Madam Chair, the only thing I can tell them is we'll do an analysis of the list submitted. You know, what happened back in 1999 or whenever it was, I'm going to have to receive a briefing on.
The honourable member from Annapolis.
Appreciate him doing that and letting me know where it stands on that. I was interested to listen to the member from Cumberland South talk about school and advocate. As you're well aware, 2 schools in my riding are closing. Margarettsville School is closing at the end of the year, as well as the Springfield Elementary School. Both of them are small rural schools. Springfield has been an isolated school which has been kept open based on that reason. It is being closed, and those students are going to be bused out of the school board district to the adjacent one in Bridgewater. I was listening for the answer that he was giving him in terms of the priority that his department will look into seeing what they can do for advocate. I'm wondering what your department has done for the community of Springfield in trying to keep their school open based on the fact that it's an isolated school.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, I think to compare the situation in Springfield and the situation in Advocate is maybe sort of drawing. Anyway, they're a little different. I've been to that Springfield school, by the way. I've been there and visited it on more than one occasion. Also in the Margarettsville school. We have not been asked for any input or any advice in that matter.
The honourable member from Annapolis.
Is your department going to develop a plan to deal with a number of these rural schools? As you know, with the depopulation that's taken place in many rural areas, the declining enrollment in many rural schools are going to be causing issues. Is your department putting together any kind of task force or to look at how we deal with the rural schools and the declining population around them?
Honourable Minister of Education.
In September '05, there will be a plan in place to deal with small, isolated rural schools. Now, the criteria have not yet really been determined, but you know, whether what is an isolated school? I mean, we know what rural schools are, but the determination of isolated is probably a more difficult concept to define.
Honourable member from Annapolis.
Just one further question, then I'll share my time with my colleague from Halifax Citadel. Just to go back to the rural schools and the depopulation. Based on the funding formula that happens now, so much per student, with the declining population in many rural schools, is there any move afoot to go towards funding instead of per student classroom? What I mean by that, funding a certain amount per class, X number of dollars for the teacher. Whether you have 25 students or 20 students in that class, it costs you X number of dollars to provide that grade 10 math course. And I'm wondering if you're going to look at doing a classroom funding as opposed to per pupil funding.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
The current formula, money is allocated 75% is allocated on the number of students that districts had in 1996. Only 25% of the formula of the money is distributed according to last year's enrollment, not this year's obviously, but last year's enrollment. As the honourable member knows, we have engaged a person to review how the money is allocated, look at the funding formula. We look forward to receiving his initial report in November, maybe even before that. That report then will be sent back to the partners for their input, and then a final one will be drafted and obviously dealt with by the department. I want to tell you that, as you know, the individual who has agreed to do that is a very excellent individual. We were indeed fortunate to get him, and he will be consulting with school boards and other educational partners as he comes to conclusions about how public monies to public schools should be distributed.
The honourable member from Annapolis.
I just want to thank the minister and the staff for answering the questions, and I look forward to hearing your response in regarding the questions I had.
The honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister, and your officials for appearing to answer questions concerning estimates. Madam Chair, I'd like to put some of my questions into some context at the outset. In my constituency, as I knocked on the doors of the homes of Halifax Citadel last year, there was one issue that stood above all the rest as a concern to the people who were in my community, and it was education. First, public education. The people in my constituency have said, and frankly, Mr. Minister, I agree with them, that the public education system in Nova Scotia is in desperate shape. They've also indicated great concerns about post-secondary education, specifically around funding. Many students reside in my constituency. They too have expressed real concerns. Now, I will not be the immediate perpetrator of friendly fire, so I would like to share with you a balanced perspective at the outset, Mr. Minister, and that is that I know that you've been a career educator, and undoubtedly this is an issue about which you care a great deal. And I can also, in fairness, say that the desperate situation of the Nova Scotia education system, particularly the public education system, was not of your creation. But you and your department have the responsibility to fix it. And I question after this budget, when 2%, only 2% of your budget has been increased, it has only been increased by 2%, whether or not you, your cabinet, your department recognize the significance of the issues and the challenges that are being faced by Nova Scotians. A good education has helped form this province. It has created the fiber of this province, not just socially, but economically. It's clear that public education has raised the standard of living and indeed has allowed people to pull themselves up out of poverty. And the expression that I used from time to time when speaking about the importance of education was that excellence costs, but over the long term, mediocrity costs even more. In the last couple of days, I had the opportunity to review some of the comments by Joseph Howe about the importance of education more than 150 years ago. Mr. Howe appeared here, as you would know, first as a reporter and eventually as a legislator and ultimately as the premier of this province. And on the issue of education, Mr. Howe said, the subject of education is one of the most important which the legislature can be called upon to consider. Compared with it, questions of roads and of fisheries and of politics sink into insignificance. I couldn't agree more with that sentiment as it relates to today. Mr. Minister, we have a desperate situation in Nova Scotia with respect to the public education system, and it is the responsibility of you and your department to lead the way to finding improvements. I'm going to start my comments with a reference to an article that's contained as a result of a study in today's Parents magazine. Undoubtedly, you'd be familiar with it, from September of 2002. It was a notoriously reported article which ranked Nova Scotia at the bottom with Prince Edward Island with respect to the quality of public education in this province. In particular, it says that when it comes to test scores and scholastic environment, we were 10th with respect to test scores. We were 10th with respect to the scholastic environment in this province. And in light of that, Mr. Minister, I would ask you, given that it appears that when it comes to the scores of our students, we are at the bottom of the heap, why were you only able to secure a 2% increase in the global budget for public education?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I heard with interest his reference to Joseph Howe and what Joseph Howe thought was important. I believe one of the things that Joseph Howe mentioned ranked education right up there with fishery and with roads and with politics. And I just want to tell you, with most Nova Scotians, roads and fisheries are very, very important. But there was one other thing that Joseph Howe did not mention in the passage that you read, and that was the importance of health to Nova Scotians. And clearly, while education is important, it's extremely important to me, and I'm in relatively good health, so it's probably more important to me right now than health is, but in your constituency, tremendous number of people in there, I would think, would in one way or another be involved in the education sector, because you have, I think, 3 major universities or 3 universities in your constituency, which are huge. I know the building in which I live is filled with students, and most of them are. So I be quite frank, in your constituency, which actually is, and I should be calling on you as an MLA now that I think of it, and making some demands of you. But education is extremely important, and it really is. But the fact is that when we were making our very difficult decisions on budget this year, is that health got the lion's share, because that's what most people said was most important. The second lion's share went to education. Now, public school education got a 2% increase, as the honourable member mentioned. However, what the other part of that question is it enough? Would I have liked to have more? No. Yes, absolutely. Did I fight for more? Yes. And did I get more? Yes. Did I get enough? No. But the population has gone down 1.5%. So, you know, to look at simply the 2% without looking at the influencing factors probably doesn't tell the whole picture.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Citadel.
Madam Chair, I would be happy to be called upon as the MLA to assist in any way possible in the Minister of Education's pursuit of better education in Nova Scotia at the post-secondary level or at the public level. I'd be concerned about whether or not, as an MLA, I'd be able to get the proper attention of he and his cabinet, however, as I turned it around and asked them whether or not they would do something to address the desperate state of our situation. To describe that the second biggest lion's share goes to education is to state the obvious, because it's the second largest line item on the budget. And 2% is really the figure that requires the greatest attention, especially when one considers it in light of the huge increases in problems that exist in our education system. Now, I hope I didn't hear the Minister of Education in any way diminish the importance of education, because what Howe said, just to repeat, is the subject of education is one of the most important which the legislature can be called upon to consider. Compared with it, questions of roads and of fisheries and of politics sink into insignificance. And I'm not sure if I see the minister nodding right now. He didn't hear the last part, and okay. For the record, Madam Chair, I'm not sure if that recorded, but the Minister of Education misheard what was spoken in the first instance and did, in fact, now endorse the question of education being, frankly, a superior issue to the ones of fisheries, roads, and politics in these circumstances. And I would dare say that he is absolutely right about that, because the The quality of a government, the measurement of a government, is based on the gifts that it leaves its children, and there's nothing more important than the gift of a good education, and in Nova Scotia we are absolutely failing. I would like to draw the minister's attention to the School Achievement Indicators Program. Now, he and his officials would know that the SAPE indicators are the standard across Canada with which there is a measurement of whether or not a system is doing well or whether it's doing badly scholastically. It is the only, as I understand it, it's the only national indicator. And as the minister would know, or his officials would know, each year there is a measurement for different subject areas. For example, and I'll just lay the foundation for this. So far, the SAPE assessments have been done in math, writing, and science. The last time that I have a record of when they tested math was in 2001. Writing, 2002. Science, 1999, although I'd like to think that there's something more up-to-date with respect to that, and if your officials have something more up-to-date with respect to science, I'd be pleased to take it. I'd like to speak about the measurements that are taken from each of those categories. With respect to math, in the year 2001, the SAPE test examined math content for 13-year-olds and problem solving for 13-year-olds in English and French, but both are of concern to us. English is obviously the predominant population in Nova Scotia. They also did the same thing for 16-year-olds. And I'd like to indicate to the minister what the results were in Nova Scotia compared to the other provinces in Canada when most recently we had tests done on the math scores of our students. Math content, 10th out of 10. Math problem solving, 10th out of 10. This is for 13-year-olds on the standard tests across this country. For 16-year-olds, 7th out of 9 for math content. And for 16-year-olds for problem solving, we were 7th out of 10. And if you flip the page over, Mr. Minister, I see the quizzical look on your face, and I'm troubled by that to some extent because these are the facts of the SAPE reports. And if you knew these in advance, one wonders whether or not there might have been a more vigorous competition for the funding for education in this province. Because when we turn to writing, the last time SAPE examined writing, Mr. Minister, was in 2002, and our 13-year-olds in English were 10th out of 10. And the 16-year-olds, Mr. Minister, were 10th out of 10. If we turn the page to science, which was done last, according to my records in 1999, for 13-year-olds, we ranked 9th out of 10, and for 16-year-olds, we ranked 7th out of 10. Mr. Minister, that's a crisis. That is desperate. That requires more than a 2% increase, and I'm asking you why you only got 2% and whether or not you would agree with me that the system's in crisis and it needs a serious improvement on where we're headed.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
The honourable member presents some interesting numbers. I take it he went through those line by line, and which is fair enough, and I would have to take a look at the overall numbers to really talk about the test scores. He's asked the question, was 2% enough? And the answer is probably no, and I have never said that 2% is enough, nor would any of the other departments that we have here indicate that their budget is enough. But that's the nature, and I think you can ask any department of any government in this country and ask them if their budget is big enough, and they will tell you no. And so I don't think we're any different there. Do I think the system is in crisis? The answer is no. I certainly do not. Does our system, can it be improved, and are we working to improve it? The answer is yes.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Citadel.
Madam Chair, simple question to the Minister of Education about whether or not he was familiar with our standing with respect to the SAIP scores.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I think I saw them 3 or 4 years ago. I have not looked at them since I entered this portfolio. However, I will tell you that this government did find $1 million last year to test every grade 6 student in literacy.
The member from Halifax Citadel.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, if the minister had indeed been more up to date and more familiar than just what had happened 3 or 4 years ago, we would have had a different situation than we have right now. Mr. Minister, I'm going to summarize those results that I've just described to you. 10th out of 10, 7th out of 9, 10th out of 10, 7th out of 10, 10th out of 10, 10th out of 10, 9th out of 10, 7th out of 10, and you're saying we're not in a crisis?
Honorable Minister of Education.
We are a system in transition. We certainly have areas for improvement, and if you take a look at the efforts and the targets of the department in the last 4 years, then you will see that there has been significant investment in the public system. Now, I know that the honourable member is getting a little high and mighty right now, but I've been drawn to my attention that it was his colleagues who dropped the money for universities by about 12.5% during their government. So I guess you know, if there is some room for improvement, we probably all would have to say that, you know, we have some responsibility.
Member from Halifax Citadel.
Madam Chair, I could appreciate the minister's interest in trying to get off the issue of SAPE scores and on to other issues. There will be a time for post-secondary education to be discussed. But since he raised the issue of funding with respect to post-secondary education, I would just respond that he will recall that at the latter years of the McClellan government, there was a $24 million commitment to be phased in at $8 million per year over 3 years. What happened under this government when they took power was that they have that $8 million commitment to $4 million and then dropped it off to nothing thereafter. That's an indication of the commitment that this government showed in relation to its predecessor, the McClellan government. That's borne out by the president of CONSUP right now. The president at St. Avex, Sean Riley, has repeated the statistics that I've just said on a number of occasions. These aren't things that I'm creating out of the blue. That's a demonstration of the commitment. But I said at the outset, Madam Chair, that this minister shouldn't bear all the responsibility for all of the problems that we face, and I will acknowledge that once again. But it is his responsibility, and it's the responsibility of the people in his department to ensure that we move in a positive direction. And it's quite obvious that his and his department's sense of whether or not we are in a crisis is at the heart of whether or not we're going to be able to take an action plan forward which satisfies the needs of young Nova Scotians and their parents. Now, if, Mr. Minister, the scholastic scores of young Nova Scotians are 10th out of 10 in relation to the rest of the country, can you please comment on whether you feel that that represents the cause for immediate, urgent action represented by a greater increase than the 2% that you've received at budget time?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Madam Chair, I want to tell you that I would prefer that our students, if what the honourable member has reported is accurate, I have no reason to believe that it wasn't. We're not 10th over 10 in the country. And I will tell you that this department has, over the past number of years, tried to remove a number of deficits and has put considerable amount of money into program development, teacher development, you know, 1 million new textbooks, new testing programs, which I think over the course of time we'll see that these results change upward. And I do want to also remind the honourable member that the education system nationally in Canada probably has about the highest standard in the world. And it is no consolation, I guess, to be 10th out of 10, as you have said. but when you have our students write international exams, we finish very well.
Honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
I'd appreciate if the Minister of Education were able to table to the floor for the legislature supporting documentation regarding his last assertion that in Canada we have perhaps the highest standard of education in a public education system. I would ask for that undertaking. I do recall when some of these exams were done that the province of Alberta, in fact, ranked quite highly, which brought up the national average. And I don't know in relation to what other countries that was measured, but that was one exam. And if you're in Alberta, I think you could be comforted about the state of the education system there. And if you could be in a number of other provinces other than Nova Scotia, I think that you could be similarly comforted. If I could refer back to the previous article that I had referenced, we know, and of course the minister knows, that a good public education isn't just about the scholastic scores that somebody receives. It's not just about the scholastic environment, where we rank 10th out of 10, according to the research that was done by this group. It also measures other types of things, the things that happen outside the traditional 3 R's: music, drama, physical education. And in those areas, unfortunately, Mr. Minister, according to this research, our province ranked 9th out of 10.
Minister of Education.
No, I want to tell you that he's talking about school bands and music programs in this country, and I tell you, our school music programs are probably the best in this country. Forget about what that thing says, but I just want to tell you, I know that.
Honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
I appreciate the bluster, Madam Chair, that comes in response to this. And I'm familiar with the bands in Truro. My sister-in-law actually plays in one. They're very good bands. But the school bands undoubtedly, Madam Chair, are good bands as well. But there are good bands elsewhere, and there is good drama elsewhere, and there is good phys ed elsewhere. And I can anecdotally tell you that since my children moved back from Ontario, instead of having physical education 5 times a week, they have it 2 times a week. There are other concerns that Nova Scotians have, but just to stay on this point and point the minister to specific research in this area, the report that I just tabled, and the minister is welcome to read, contains the specific indication of what this means. At page 64 of the article that I was referring to, they refer to a Canadian Fitness Lifestyle Research Institute report on physical activity and various other things. And at the heading of this, they say education is more than formal knowledge. It involves development of personal talents from sports to music and drama. And it may well be drama club or art class, not math or history, that captures and keeps a child's interest in school. And Mr. Minister, our students ranked 9th out of 10, despite your bluster. Do you have a response to that?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
What I can tell the honourable member before I get into his question was he talks about school drama and school musicals. We have some of our high schools put on just exceptionally fine school musicals and school dramas. Indeed, I had the great privilege of about 3 weeks ago going to see Copacabana at the Colchester Educational Center, and I would again stack the productions, our school productions, up against the best in the country, I would think. Now, you were talking about phys ed and lifestyle and things like that. The honourable member does teach or touch on a topic where I think it's well documented. This government has taken numerous actions, including physically active lifestyle. We've started the Office of Health Promotion. We have the lifestyle of young Nova Scotian students, a lot of them is not really very good. And when we measure ourselves against the rest of the country, we haven't fared very well. except when it comes to things like juvenile diabetes and things like that, where we've done very well, unfortunately. So the government has recognized that and, again, has turned its energies, some of its energies, to trying to deal with this, not only through the schools, but through the Department of Health Promotion. And just give you an example, Madam Chair, of some of the programs that we have done. I think my colleague, the Minister of Health Promotion, responded to it in a question perhaps from the member from Kings West the other day. We're talking about, we had the highest rate of teen smoking in the country. And because of the initiatives that have been taken, at least I think in a good part by the initiatives of this government since we came to office, that we are no longer have the dubious distinction of leading the country in teen smoking, we found that the number of young people that are smoking has decreased, and that's a good thing. Now, I say that, you know, I guess effectively when you're at the top, you have no place to go but down. But the government has looked at education from a broad perspective, and we've not only been concerned with the academic things, we have been concerned really with the health and wellness.
The honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
This is a crossover for both the minister and for me, Madam Chair, because he was the former Minister of Health and heard me speak often about the issues and concerns of smoking and some of the things that he raises. And he can't make those comments without getting my dander up about health promotion in this province. And I know that the Honourable Minister knows of my great concern about that. He seemed at one point to have the pom-poms in his hand and singing a tune something like "We're no longer last" or "We're second last" or something like that when it comes to smoking amongst teenagers. If they were serious about making sure that smoking stopped amongst teenagers in this province, they would make sure that the Smoke Free for Life program that only is made available to about 20% of the young people in this province is in fact available to about 100% of them. I see the quizzical look on the minister's face once again. Smoke Free for Life is a program that's recognized by Health Canada as one of the best teen anti-smoking programs in Canada. But unfortunately, even though it is modeled in Nova Scotia, it's not one that's available, or it's not one that's provided to all of our students. And for him to indicate that there's greater efforts being made with respect to physical activity, I think it could be easily argued that in Nova Scotia, our young people are the least active of any young people in all of Canada, Mr. Minister. That's a serious problem. We have half as many young people involved in sport as the province of Saskatchewan that has about the same population. We take more money out of sport and taxes than we actually put in. This province, government parades around about the $3.8 million that was just injected. When you look at the $3.8 million that was just injected in health promotion as a percentage of the increase in the total health budget increased by about $233 million. Health promotion increased by 3.8 of that if you wrap them all together. So once again, just as Statistics Canada has said for a long period of time, we in Nova Scotia spend less than 2% of our health care budget on illness prevention and health promotion. We're not doing anything grand. We're way behind the other provinces, and the problem is that if we timidly move towards, even if we, and I'm getting an increasing sense that the government hasn't fully come to terms with the significance of some of these problems. If we even partially come to terms with them and we timidly move in a positive direction, we're never going to get to where we need to be. That's my rant about health promotion. Sorry, I missed that. I wish I did catch it, Mr. Minister, but the point that should be made here is that in our education system, if we rank 9th out of 10 when it comes to drama, physical education, and music, surely we should be doing something about it. And hopefully people in your department are familiar with the research that suggests that if you find, some of it is borne out, and I think you may have referred to it, that if you want somebody to achieve in life, if you want success in their life, find something that they're good at. And it may be drama, music, or a sport, or it may be chess. And just drill down on great, tremendous research that has been done in this area. I won't go on about it, but it seems clear again that the significance of the problem in our education system aren't realized by the Minister of Education, which is one of the most troubling things of all. We'll move to the issue of having some rigor in the education system, and I know that this government has shown again some interest in this area with its move toward report cards, which I would applaud, more standardized report cards. On the question of class sizes, which I expect we will hear the minister comment on, there have been steps that were announced to ensure that on a graduated basis, students who started school, I believe it was last year, will continue to be, at least for the first 3 or 4 years of their elementary time, be in a class that doesn't exceed 25, at least as long as it doesn't exceed 25 until September 30th or so of that year. But it's interesting to note that in other provinces like Ontario, for those same years, they're looking to limit class sizes to 20. It's not that we are particularly avant-garde with respect to those types of initiatives. At page 29 of the Learning for Life document that the minister should have in front of him, there is a reference to the issue of accreditation, which the minister might recall was an issue that our party showed some real interest in, although we were prepared to go beyond just 8 schools as a pilot across the province for an accreditation program. My question for the minister is whether or not that program is going to be accelerated to ensure that all the schools, all the public schools in Nova Scotia will go through a proper accreditation program so that the young people and their parents realize that the schools are being tested properly and that they're meeting the standards, the high standards that Nova Scotians reasonably should expect.
Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank the honourable member for the question, and in light of his comments leading into this question and from the question before, I expect he may wish to spend a little time with my colleague, the Minister of Health Promotion. I guess in terms of the accreditation, and I support school accreditation, and I've supported school accreditation for a long, long time. And there are 8 pilot schools going through an accreditation process now, and there'll be 8 more added. But I guess more importantly than the accreditation to get the whole thing going is that all schools are required to develop a school improvement plan in conjunction with the School Advisory Council. So the fact that this is now required means that there are going to be positive steps taken. When we review the pilots, we'll determine the template for the accreditation province and move for the accreditation process and move it out across the whole province.
Honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
The minister has indicated, Madam Chair, that he is a supporter of the accreditation program, but acknowledges that it's only available in Nova Scotia for 8 pilot locations. He speaks about all schools having to put together a plan. That's a very modest indication of whether or not each school is able to set a plan for the year and actually achieve something. It seems to be basic. One would hope that schools would have had plans going back decades, and surely this government and this minister isn't taking any credit for the fact that schools are actually having to plan a year in advance. This is a square question about the issue of accreditation, where you measure whether or not the schools are meeting expectations that are set in advance. The minister has indicated that he is supportive of this idea. To say that we will study it further and then perhaps go forward is inconsistent with what the minister has already said. I'm asking the minister whether or not he's prepared to move forward with accreditation with greater urgency than what has been indicated up to this point.
Honourable Minister of Education.
As I indicated, Madam Chair, that accreditation was important to the government and it was important to the minister. And if you looked at the, the accountability statements in the document from the school board and their meetings around the province, and also our Learning for Life meetings around the province. Clearly, the issue of accountability, and part of that accountability is accreditation. We have begun the process with pilot schools. We're going to develop a template for all schools in the province. You know, it is one thing to say, well, just go ahead and drop the hammer on the schools. But if we are, and the reason you do accreditation is for improvement and to maintain standards. And as the honourable member knows, if you wish to have the improvement move along as quickly as you would like to have it move, you have to have buy-in from those who are going to be involved. And you know, my experience is that it's probably more efficacious to go slower and do it right than to go quickly and not do it right.
Honourable member from Halifax Citadel.
That seems to be the mantra, Madam Chair, of this whole government. Slow is the order of the day for practically every initiative that they talk about. The minister responsible for the Office of Health Promotion has heard me frequently speak about the slowness of speed with respect to it. But when are we going to possibly, when this government took the reins of government back 5 years ago, it had a mandate to ensure that we were going to in fact move forward. And what's most troubling is that when one compares the scores on the SAPs, and I will allow the minister to do this in his own time and respond if he wishes on the record with respect to whether or not our SAP scores have gone up or gone down in the time that this government has been in place. It would indicate that our SAPs, certainly with respect to the information that I've provided already today, have been going down. So we're going in the wrong direction with a government that doesn't seem to have a particularly strong sense of urgency about whether or not we are in a crisis. And it's obvious that we're going to stay 10th out of 10. We're obviously not going to be able to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps if the response is a let's study it, let's be prudent, let's recognize that these things take time. Well, in other provinces and in other places, there's a greater sense of urgency. And when Nova Scotia young students are applying to schools in other universities and looking for jobs in other parts of Canada, the last thing we would ever want is for somebody to be saying they received an education in Nova Scotia and will apply a discount as a result. I'm not suggesting that we're there, Mr. Minister, but as the scores continue to come out increasingly, and as our government lacks any sense of urgency about whether or not we're going to move forward, it is the young people of Nova Scotia who are going to suffer. It's going to be the economy of Nova Scotia that's going to suffer. And without that sense of urgency, and with only receiving a 2% increase in your budget, it's clear that we are not at all supporting the young people who need to move forward. I'd like to turn to the subject of special education. Which the minister knows is a very pressing issue for thousands and thousands of families across this province. I would argue that it's a pressing issue for all 150,000 students in our public education system, approximately, because a strong special education system is a win-win for all students. A system that is underfunded and under-resourced is one that is going to fail everyone. So the comments that I make, Mr. Minister, are not just in relation to those families, those children who have special needs, but for all parents who are saying that the integration that was promised has not at all been a success. It has failed in some respects, and we need to draw attention to that, and we need to fix it. I'm a supporter of the principle of integration, Mr. Minister, but back in 1995, as you and your officials would know, a special education policy was released for Nova Scotians. 1995. And as I thought about that, as I was thinking about my comments here today,
I'm having a hard time hearing the honourable member from Halifax Citadel speak. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
As I thought about that, thank you, Madam Chair, it occurred to me that a student that would have been in grade primary at the time that we came forward with a very progressive special education policy manual would be finishing grade 8 right now, going into their last year of grade 9, and soon they'll be in high school, and it's absolutely clear that the special education system in Nova Scotia is also failing miserably many students and families. Could you comment on that?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, what I know about 1995, and I'm going from memory, is that at that time the government closed a number of the facilities that did real good work with special needs people in the province, and that group, including the Youth Training Center in Truro, and I believe there was one up in Sydney, and others that filled a real role for certain young people, not the really young people, but I do know that that was done at that time. I think the provisions for special needs children in the public schools of Nova Scotia are better than they have been at any time in the history that I can remember. Yes, I support what the Honourable Member says, that there are some children and some parents for whom the school may not be providing the support, the optimum type of support. But however, I can tell you that the department is acting on all 34 recommendations of that special education committee. You know, the school boards, they get $48 million in targeted special education funding that they have to use to support students with special needs. And I'm told when we talk to the school boards and look at how other monies are expended, the boards tell us that they put that much more again into special education, which is a good thing. You know, in this past year, Madam Chair, that the government has invested $2.5 million through Learning for Life to increase professional support services for students who are in schools. And that means that students are having the more, talking about special support as opposed to special education teachers, more personnel, like more speech-language pathologists and school psychologists and more assistive technology and speech-language pathologists. I guess I mentioned those. We have also got the reading recovery program throughout the system now. You know, there is provision, currently provision for a tuition agreement for school boards, and of course we've announced the tuition support program that will be implemented this fall. You know, every child, I think, in the schools is special, and they all have different needs. When we talk about special education, of course, we were talking about children probably whose learning needs, they need a little help to learn, or sometimes they need a lot of help to learn. And you know, it is a challenge for every teacher. I think you will find, Madam Chair, that teachers are probably better prepared to work with those children, better prepared now than they ever have been before. Do we have a ways to go? Yes. Is this government committed to it? Yes. Have we put tangible and measurable commitments into place or initiatives into place in special education? The answer is yes.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Citadel.
Yes, of course, Madam Chair. Some small steps have been taken, but the real question is whether or not measurable change has happened, whether or not we have actually moved the yardsticks in the way that Nova Scotians can appreciate that the special education system is actually making a difference. I note with some interest the minister's comments about whether or not there should be facilities outside the existing school structures, in perhaps not like the segregated systems that existed before, that provided more of a modified environment where there is learning, there is an opportunity for integration that is more of a hybrid. Pardon me? Yes, and success. I agree with him with respect to that, if done poorly, integration becomes dumping. You dump people out of a segregated system into an integrated process. You don't provide them with the resources they need, and it becomes a worse situation for young people. And frankly, Mr. Minister, that's the situation that many families, not all families, but many families find themselves in Nova Scotia. They are trying to function with education assistants who are underpaid, underappreciated, as we found out recently with respect to the Halifax Regional School Board and the negotiations that went on there, where they reduced the work hours for many of the workers there, forcing highly dedicated and qualified workers out of the system in the first place. That's a result of funding. And there is a trickle-down effect that is related to the 2% that we were talking about earlier. If the school boards have the money, then they're able to provide the educational assistance with the kinds of support that we need, and they won't be left flapping around trying to desperately string things together and telling parents that your child may have extreme learning problems, but unless they represent a physical danger to themselves or to somebody else in the school, or unless they have trouble with their bodily functions, they're not going to receive an educational assistant. That is the reality of many parents across Nova Scotia. They are being told that this isn't about integrating young people who have learning difficulties. It's only if you become a behavior issue as a result of your learning difficulty that you receive an EA. That's ridiculous, and that's inconsistent with the spirit that the 1995 policy was put in place to address. And it's something that I would be interested in following up with the minister on, to explore whether or not there are ways, and with his officials, to find those transitions and to provide the level of resources that are truly needed to make sure that special education works in this province. Now, I was taken aback by the minister's comments that he is acting on the 34 recommendations that were put forward by the committee, committee being the Special Education Implementation Review Committee. And I'd just like to trace some of the history with respect to that committee. It was a committee mainly of experts that was called upon by this government to examine the issues of special education, report back on what are the needs, essentially. Where do we need to go? Their report was completed in June of 2001. And they had been calling for all of that time for a response from the government one way or another. They were frustrated that they weren't receiving any kind of a response to the report that they put forward. Almost 2 years later, on April 8th of last year, a response came, and the minister may recall the discussions. I know the former Minister of Education might recall the report having been tabled in the House. There wasn't much fanfare at all, and there really wasn't much knowledge amongst many people that there was, in fact, a government response. But as far as the committee being satisfied that their recommendations were being acted on, the minister might recall, certainly the former Minister of Education will recall, a press conference that was held on May 14th down in the foyer of this building, where that committee and its representatives appeared and spoke about the response of the government. And they were anything but supportive. They were completely critical of the response that was provided. Ms. French, Carmel French, as I recall, was the main spokesperson for that organization, and it said that the government has completely ignored many of the recommendations that were put forward. In fact, as I recall it, they said that out of the $17.5 million, occasionally the government at that time was trying to claim that $35 million was going into special education. That eventually was debunked because half of that was the result of reducing class sizes, which was a separate thing that they often took credit for. With respect to the $17.5 million that really went into special education, and the minister referred to some of it, this committee was asking for a $20 million injection back in 2001. And I'm not aware of whether or not there was an injection put in 2001 or in 2002. But it does seem clear that in 2003, eventually $2.5 million of additional money was put in. Now, this group said that of the 17.5 that was spread over 3 years that was being put before the Nova Scotians as the injection of this department and this government towards special education, only 10 million of it did not address the recommendations that they put forward in the first place. So, Mr. Minister, I'm going to suggest to you that the people who put together the report that you referred to, that you suggested you're acting on, are a particularly unhappy group who feel that you've completely swung and missed the ball. There's no $20 million initial injection, and most of the priorities that you're putting forward are inconsistent with the ones that they've already recommended.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Go back, Madam Chair, and simply to state that the government is acting on all 34 of those recommendations. There's no question that the committee, when they did the report, and you know, I've been through this with other reports, they were looking for an immediate $20 million infusion. Money was not available. However, you know, the province has put into place its Learning in Life initiatives, which is beginning to pay off. He mentioned the $2.5 million that went in last year. It was 2.5 or 3, Darryl? Last year. 2.5 last year, which is topped up by an additional $3 million this year. So there was now $5 million in that base funding. And our intention is to keep increasing the base, to add more money to it next year. We are moving, Madam Chair. You know, I guess probably I've yet to see a committee function that when they report they would like to see everything implemented immediately. And most of us would too. And I've been on those committees, you want to know the truth, in various types of committees over various numbers of roles. But, you know, people, when you sit down and you talk with them, they understand that it's not possible to do everything immediately.
The honourable member from Timberley Prospect.
Yes, here we go. Well, Mr. Minister, you're a lot calmer man than I am. Because I remember John McEachern, I remember Robbie Harrison. I was a classroom teacher. I remember what those guys did to the system, and to hear this member stand and piously go on at great length, it sticks in my throat. Now, if you want a little bit of passion, I'll give you some passion. You want to talk about feeling about education. When did the Liberals finally discover education?
When the New Democrats
give me a break. They didn't do anything for the years they were in government. They gutted the system. They gutted it. They gutted it. And you want negativity, I'll give you negativity. You want to remember John McEachern and what he did and what we thought of the school system. Why did the Liberals get defeated? Because of what they did to the school system in this province. That should be on the record. And Mr. Minister, I compliment you for your patience and the lectures and the reading from the materials. Like, give me a break. I remember Robbie Harrison bringing in the planes as he answered the questions. And we would say to him, will you answer the question? Will you show the leadership? That's why we're here, isn't it? We had to put up with that. We had to put up with the quality of those ministers of education. And I know there's certain members of that caucus always making the comments about Miss Purvis and how much I miss her. Well, I'll tell you, she stood in this place on certain occasions and had her say. Made some mistakes, but she had her say. So let's make the record clear. The Liberals have discovered education. Well, aren't I happy? No, don't get me started on that P3 nonsense. I can't believe that I even have to consider that. I remember so well how the member from Clare tried to, if you remember it, get an election opportunity when he took the member or the person who was running there, Karen Willis-Durden, for a photo op to a school at the head of St. Margaret's Bay, and they threw him off the school grounds. Threw him off the school grounds. And incidentally, she did very poorly in that election. I mean, if we're going to have photo ops when it comes to education, I know who beat her. I know who beat her, but let me tell you, I want you to know, Mr. Minister, I congratulate you for your patience. And then when I look at what happens I hear this all this stuff about phys ed teachers, and I see some of the inadequacies that we had to put up with in the school system when the dollars weren't available, when the tough decisions weren't being made, and I looked at who was making those decisions. John McCachran was a school teacher, and I told him to his face at one time, shame on you. You're the Minister of Education, you have the top job in this province, and you are showing absolutely no leadership. None. And to his credit, he got out of Dodge before I ever got elected. What an opportunity it would have been to be able to be in this house with John McCachran and have a comment or two from him on education. And then he was succeeded, if you remember. Then he was succeeded by Robbie Harrison, Horton High's creator. He had all the answers. Harrison had all the answers. But, you know, he wasn't smart enough like McCachran and get out of Dodge. He decided he could keep running. Well, we see what happens today. Mr. Harrison is no longer with us. I mean, I want you to know that when it comes to Liberal ministers of education, their record is deplorable, and let that be on the record. Let that be on the record as a school teacher, as an education critic, but somebody who was extremely frustrated as a parent through those years. And I can tell you the example I'm going to talk about, and you know it's near and dear to my heart, Sir John A. Macdonald High School. I want to thank the member from Chester St. Margaret's. I want to thank the member from Chester St. Margaret's. Finally, the cooperation that we needed and the work that was done by this government, because the Liberals never did a thing to Sir John A. Macdonald High School. Never did a thing. Environmental concerns, problems with air quality. How do I know this? My daughter, God bless her, she has her mother's brains and her good looks, was the president of the Students' Council. She was the president of the Students' Council. And she would come home to the school administrator at the time at Brookside Junior High, of which I was, and say, Dad, we have got problems here. And I would say to her, well, you know, you should write to the Minister of Education. You're the Student Council president. Invite them to come out to Sir John A. Invite them to see the problems firsthand. And guess what? Jane Purvis was the first Minister of Education to come to Sir John A. So I got to put that on the record before I get into any of these more important questions. But you know, I turn, no matter where we are in this house, you can't leave. You can't leave the sound effects. And I hear the member from Citadel waxing eloquent as he is. I want to know, revisionism of history is not why we're in this house. We're in this house to address issues. We're in this house to address what we're doing now. I don't agree with everything the Minister of Education has done. But let me tell you, there has been more leadership from that administration, as weak as it might be on certain occasions, than anything left from the third party as long as I've followed politics in this province. You take all the exception you want, because if you want to have your time here and talk about Harrison and McCachran, you fill your boots. So let's have a look. Let's have a look here at some of the things that we have from history. Now, Mr. Minister, you're aware that we are getting a new high school in this growing community. We have this new high school in this growing community. In fact, I want you to know that one of the parts of the community is no longer attending that high school. They've gone off to Prospect Road. They've come up the Prospect Road and they go to Halifax West. A tough decision for our community, but it's a decision that has happened. So John A. Macdonald High School is a decision I've privately and publicly congratulated you on. Can you give us the time frame when you expect to see the first sod turned at that school?
Honourable Minister of Education.
Tell them it's opening in September.
The school should open, Madam Chair, the school should open in September '06. We're trying to go back from that, so I expect you'll see a sod turn before the end of this year.
The honourable member from Timberley Prospect.
Considering that good news announcement and how it was done on that particular day, I thank you for allowing me as an opposition member to be part of this. Would you like me to wind down debate at 6 o'clock? You're giving me hand signals. Am I adjourning it or am I? You want me to go deeper? She wants 2 more minutes. Now listen. I've been encouraged to not go back to the past. I had the new members say to me, don't bring that stuff up. Let's forget all that. Well, guess who doesn't forget it? Not just the school teachers, the voters. The voters don't forget it. Would they trust this crowd with the education system in this province again? Would they? Never. Never. I know it for a fact. I asked the people on the doorsteps. I saw the results come in. People said to me on so many occasions, why did so many people in Timberley Prospect vote for the member of the NDP? And the answer is very simple.